want to go ahead and thank Ginny for coming. She is of the Independent Women's Forum, who is also here to sponsor this event. Obviously, they're amazing. They have a lot of fellows who are also our contributors. We have a lot of overlap. It's an amazing organization that cares a lot about women's issues, but also how that extends into all sorts of different policy areas, et cetera, et cetera. One of those being education. So Ginny is here. So if you guys could give it up for Ginny Gentle.
Yay! Opportunity. Thank you to Emma, to Young Voices, to my colleagues Ivan Ruff, Gabriella, and thank you, panelists. We're going to talk for about 30 minutes about school choice, which is more commonly known as education freedom today, and we're going to talk about it specifically in the context of Virginia. And that is because we need to talk about it in Virginia. I was talking to some colleagues that I regularly see on Capitol Hill. We're always on the Hill talking about school choice, and we forget to go to Richmond and talk about school choice. And we write about ESAs and the great governments around the country, and we forget to chastise the folks in Richmond for not getting it done here. And so we're going to talk about what's being done around the country, what can be done, and what should be done in Virginia. We have a great panel for that. We've got Nathaniel Cunneen from the American Federation for Children, CJ Saylor from Americans for Prosperity, and Barnard from the Reason Foundation. And let's go ahead and start with a lightning round. We're going to pass this mic so fast. How do each of you define education freedom?
Dollars following students, so that every student can get the education provider that best fits their individual needs.
Life-changing. Without educational freedom, I wouldn't be here today. Grew up in Detroit, Michigan. Had an opportunity to go to a school outside of my district. It was a school I had to take a test to get in. It was not as violent. It was a school that I would have been forced to go to in my neighborhood. It was not dilapidated. I had the opportunity to really excel and to really reach my full potential. So school choice is life-changing.
Education freedom, I think, means that there's going to be a mind-boggling array of options in the education system. So it's not just about the classroom you're in or the building you're in, but it's also about how education is done.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, so we are going to talk about what's been done and is happening and unfolding in other states, but let's talk about right now what is existing in Virginia. And CJ, I'm going to call on you for that. There are school choice options or education freedom options in Virginia. I was just talking to somebody about the fact that my daughters have benefited from school choice. During COVID closures, we left the Arlington Public School System and we enrolled in the Virginia Virtual Academy, VAVA, which is a public virtual school serving 6,000 students in the state of Virginia, and nobody ever hears about it. CJ, what are some other options in Virginia?
Sure, thank you, Virginia. I mean, as we know, we're calling it the red alert here. In terms of education, we're really on high alert. We have a governor who I spent some time with on the campaign trail prior to my time at AFP. We're really talking to Virginians about the issues they care about most, especially here in Northern Virginia and Alexandria. You all are faced with some really dire situations in terms of getting children out of schools that are failing them, that are not suited for their learning potential. And what we're looking at is really coming together. I'm glad that Gabby and Virginia and others decided to bring this group together, because there's some options out there that we may not be tackling in terms of really making Virginia a free school choice state. We're looking at our neighboring states have been able to get it done. But I think really when everyone leaves here, we'd love for all of us to come together and find a way to work together on this issue. One of the things that we looked at last General Assembly session in Richmond, as many of you know or don't know, AFP pushes policy champions, those who support choice in education. We support them while they're running for office, help them get over the finish line, make a difference in their races. And then we go to work in the General Assembly for them to now make good on their promises to pass the bills that are going to bring education to freedom here to Virginia. So last session, our ESA bill did not make it out of the education committee. It was a hard pill to swallow. I had only been with the organization for 2 months at the time. And what I saw was that the ESA bill had a lot of different challenges from a lot of different groups that either didn't agree with one aspect of it, others were not too happy with it. So what I said going into this year is for us to do some listening sessions throughout the Commonwealth. We just finished one listening session. They went in Woodbridge, out in Lynchburg, down in Richmond, Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach, really hearing what we can add to the bill to make it more appealing. And then also, what we found was that options of the tax credit, we've been talking about that. There's some other options out there that we have that can make this bill more appealing as we get ready for session in 2024, that we can actually make ESA's tax credit a reality. The governor already has a great bill that's out, EISTC, which is more of a scholarship for students that are undeserving. But we want to look at what more we can do. So we're really just going to, over the next couple of months, going to just be gathering up a lot of information, research. We're going to meet with some of those that we had not had a chance to talk with last year, so that when we go into session this year, we're going with a stronger bill that is more likely to pass, and we can get unanimous support on and get it to Governor Youngkin's desk so he can sign it. And the reality here, folks, is we only have 2 years. The delegates, their races this November. It's a 2-year cycle. The governor, he's unable to run. Just whatever happens, and everyone's asking, thinking he's going to run for president. I know he said he's committed to Virginia. So we only have him for 2 years. So we really only got 2 years to get this done. That's why we're calling this a red alert. So 2 years to get this done, but we have to let the candidates, the folks that are running now, to get them across the finish line, because those are going to be our policy champions who are going to come down to Richmond and vote for those policies. So I have a lot more to share, but wanted to just really kind of set the tone on where we are and what we're doing now in terms of building up a bigger coalition.
All right, so CJ, I heard you talking about that tax credit program that's been around since 2013 in Virginia, and I think it serves about 5,000 kids, but they're small scholarships. They're not making those options available for families that larger programs or more flexible programs like education savings accounts or ESAs can make. Virginia also has 7 charter schools. Nathan and I are from Florida. Florida has over 700. So we should be embarrassed that Virginia has 7 charter schools, because this law has been in place and it's been tinkered with for years. We should be embarrassed. The Virginia State Board of Education just approved a one lab school that will be sponsored by Virginia Commonwealth University. But Nathan, could you tell us a little bit about polling when it comes to education freedom? And parents might have these options in a state like Virginia, but what are we seeing in polls as far as what they're communicating, what they really want?
Well, I'll just add first real quick also that not only does Florida have 700 charter schools, they also just enrolled 300,000 students into the school choice program for the upcoming school year, which is just unprecedented, unbelievable, and a huge victory in terms of the broader school choice movement. But you ask about polling and sort of public support, and I don't think it would surprise anybody to learn that after COVID, there was this huge growth in support for school choice as schools were closed and many parents were dissatisfied with what they saw their children learning and all of these different things. And school choice, support for school choice nationally had risen to about 72% from all Americans. And every political party and every other group all had majorities that supported school choice. Democrat, Republican, Independent, all supported school choice. And those numbers have actually held steady over the last 3 years. Those numbers weren't soft. New national polling that came out through my organization last month shows that 71% of Americans support school choice, 67% of Democrats support school choice, 77% of Republicans support school choice. And that is playing out across the country as more and more families express their desire for these sorts of education options.
Right, so we shouldn't be timid when we're going to Richmond or when we're writing about these things. And maybe think about school choice. No, we're representing what parents actually want. All right, Christian, I want you to jump in here, and I'm sure we're going to turn the conversation to all ESAs all the time. But before we do that, and I know you'll have some great contributions to that conversation, let's talk about public school choice option, open enrollment, funding following the child from one district to another. That's something that might be considered in Virginia, and you have some knowledge about how that would work. Tell us about that.
So, kind of one of the underappreciated forms of school choice. When we talk about school choice, a lot of the time we're talking about private school choice, or the freedom to get your public school dollars and use them for homeschooling or mixing and matching services. But there's also a form of public school choice that's not just charter schools called open enrollment. There are resources out there saying that almost every state has some form of open enrollment, but we recently did a comprehensive 50-state study showing that only 12 states had anything close to resembling comprehensive open enrollment. And what that means is that a student doesn't have to go to the school or school district that they are residentially assigned to. So, kind of to continue along with the trend of giving Virginia a firm kick, we, on our criteria, out of 5 criteria that we evaluate for open enrollment, Virginia gets a 0 out of 5. So what that means is that districts are not required to accept a student who doesn't live within their district boundaries. Even schools within a district are not required to take a student who's in the wrong zip code. The state education agency doesn't report anything about open seats or how transfers can happen. And schools and school districts themselves don't talk about how many open seats they have. So that's a good 0 out of 5. And also, schools and school districts can charge tuition to families. Public schools can charge tuition in Virginia. So the important thing is that this is another avenue to expand school choice. And in states that have robust open enrollment, think of Indiana. Indiana is a huge school voucher program. Their biggest school choice program in Indiana is open enrollment. So I'll leave you with that.
So I know we're spouting a lot of facts and information to you all. Do visit the Federation for Children website for polling information. It's regularly updated there. And then visit Christian's page specifically for this information on open enrollment in Virginia and beyond. The Reason Foundation has that information for you. Okay, public school choice, all right, it's okay. But we know that like LeBron James just created a choice school or a new school, but he did it through the district. And 0 8th graders passed the math test the last 3 years. So many of us who are parents are pretty frustrated with our Virginia public schools and don't really see this is as the way to go. So let's talk about ESAs and the hope that can offer. Maple, let's start with you and tell us about some of the legislative victories. You mentioned Florida. Tell us some good news there and beyond.
Yeah, well, if political movements had championships, then school choice just won a three-peat. 2021 was the best year for school choice in U.S. history, and then 2022 was the best year for school choice in U.S. history, and guess what? 2023 has been the best year for school choice in U.S. history, and it's not even over yet. There's still a really great chance for victories in Texas, and maybe even in Pennsylvania, North Carolina. So, like, legislative victories have been over the top. Most, I think what Ginny is referring to is there have been 7 states this year that have done fully universal ESA, education savings account programs. Florida was one of them. I am indeed very proud. But 7 states where every single student will be eligible for an education savings account within 3 years, which is really exciting. And I think even to tie this sort of into the conversation we were having previously, is there is sizable overlap between the states that have advanced, really expansive private school choice programs and have really great open enrollment policies. It's almost like passing these private school choice programs forces the school districts to take open enrollment seriously as a form of public school choice. Also, there's evidence of this in Florida in the charter sector. So really, I think what we're seeing is the increase in support for private school choice options is falling dominoes that are making their way into state legislatures. These laws are being passed, kids are getting enrolled, and it's creating a more diverse and robust education system for everybody.
All right. Going to hand the mic back to you and have you and CJ talk a little bit about what leads to these legislative victories. I'd love for you to tell a little bit about the Iowa story, what happened in the primaries there, and then CJ, you can speak a little to what's been going on in Virginia when it comes to setting us up for success.
Yeah, I think the big hammer is definitely the role that school choice has come to play in political elections. All of you who live in Virginia will remember well Governor Youngkin's campaign where education played a huge role, and school choice issues are similarly doing that across the country. 75% of the candidates supported by my organization last year won their elections, which is a crazy number. In places like Iowa, there's a really clear story to how electoral victories got to a school choice program. So if I take you back to last year, there was a small school choice proposal that barely squeaked its way through the Iowa Senate and then fell short in the House. Governor Reynolds kind of went back and was frustrated, and she came out publicly and endorsed primary challenger, God, I'm butchering that word, 2 Republicans. She was going to take out members of her own party and replace them with people who supported school choice. We worked in that state, ultimately removed 6 incumbents and replaced them with school choice supporting legislators. We came back this legislative session and passed a full universal, every kid in Iowa will be eligible within 3 years education savings account program, which I think left a lot of people saying like, oh man, maybe we should have passed the smaller program when we had the chance because we just got creamed. And that story has been playing out in several other states as well. School choice education options are issues that parents care about, and I think it's fair to say that parents vote for the best interest of their children much more loyally than they do with political parties. And I expect that trend to continue.
CJ, what's going on in Virginia?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because right now we have our delegates that are up for election in our Senate. As many of you know, we have the House by a few candidates, and then the Senate down by 3. So we have to hold the House, and we have to win the Senate. Now, in order for ESAs or any freedom of education choice to become an option, a reality here, we really got to get these policy champions through the finish line. We heard the story of Governor Reynolds and others working together to really get rid of those who are not supporting educational freedom. But at AFP, we've endorsed 17 candidates. We have more we're going to roll out over the next couple of weeks. But those 17 we feel are policy champions. They support educational options. We believe that they're best positioned to win in general. This is going to be a tightly contested election season for us. Again, it's red alert. Let's not forget that word tonight, red alert. Let's go tell 8 of our friends in our communities or the churches or in your neighborhoods about the red alert that we need 8 of your friends to come out and support these policy champions in this general election. Because they're going to be the ones down in Richmond come January that's going to push these bills forward that we put forward. And right now, we're just really reassessing the ESA bill. Of course, we want to put that forward again, but we're also looking at some other options. My grandma once told me, if you continue to do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result, it's insanity. So we have some partners that have been pushing the ESA bill for years, and we got to try a different approach. I'm not saying we got to get rid of the ESA bill, but we got to try a different approach in terms of putting a bill for it that's going to get passed. It's going to have everyone in this room and all of our delegates and senators to support it, so we can get it to Governor Youngkin's desk and he can sign it, and we will be listed among the list that you just named. But I would say that that's where it starts, along with being aware and being passionate about choice in education, and we know it's something we have to do something about, but in order to really do something, the action that we all must take is really supporting those candidates that are running, that are going to vote for an education bill that's going to come up in this legislative session. we look forward to seeing everyone in Richmond to help us get that through the finish.
All right, I'd like to explore this idea of gubernatorial advocacy a little bit more. We talked about Governor Reynolds. We talked about Governor Youngkin's leadership on education, just some other education issues. And Christian, you wrote a piece fairly recently kind of running down the legislative victories, and you mentioned Governor Abbott in Texas, who threatened to veto an ESA bill that he felt didn't go far enough. So CJ, I hear you talking about let's get maybe a compromise bill or let's have a different approach. But I'm wondering, when you talk about Governor Reynolds, when you talk about Governor Abbott, maybe the governor can come in strong and make a difference. So CJ, can you just tell us what's going on in Texas a little bit? Oh, sorry, Christian.
We do. So the struggle with states like Texas is they've been trying to do school choice in Texas too for a long time. When you talk about school choice advocacy, for a long time, for like 20 years until since Nathan came around, like everything started going great.
It was pure luck. It was pure luck. Very lucky.
For a long time, the name of the game was called means-tested programs. So, like aiming small, creating small programs that are just for families that are 200% of the federal poverty line or lower. Well, so the strategy change that happened was that the universal programs hold better. So, what these governors are starting to do, Governor Abbott is doing this too, is they're saying we need to go big because that's the most popular thing. The reason that school choice has grown, like if you look up EdChoice's ABCs of School Choice, it's a report that tracks the number of programs and the number of students served since the first school choice program was introduced in the United States. It's just ticking up slowly and slowly and slowly and slowly over years. And the problem is because these programs don't have coalitions of families or big political coalitions behind them. And so the strategy change was that just go big up front. This is the most popular thing, and that's what all these legislative victories have been. So what Governor Abbott is doing, I mean, I was at the Texas legislature earlier this year when Senate Bill 8 was being considered, and that was a big, comprehensive, universal school choice program. And there are political barriers. Rural Republicans are always brought up a lot when we talk about barriers to passing universal school choice. They're about to head into special session, and what Governor Abbott is saying is you need to work something out that is actually substantial. A lot of states have school choice programs that serve, 5,000 to 10,000 kids. They go super slow, and it's like they have no life in them because there's no coalition or political strength behind it all. So what they're trying to do now, and what Governor Sanders has seen success with this too, is go big. That's the clear strategy.
All right. Wouldn't that be great? All right, so we need to get the legislators animated about school choice and informed, particularly if they're from rural areas and they have heard the myths. What can we all do in Virginia to inform and animate legislators? And so I'm not thinking about this from a political perspective, I'm thinking about this from a policy perspective. We have a bunch of wonks in the room, we all write a lot of op-eds. What do we need to be talking about to really inform legislators? We need to be talking about polling, we need to be talking about what other states are doing, we need to be talking about strong gubernatorial leadership. What else? How can we get Virginia legislators informed and animated?
Well, I'm jaded about this. I'm very, and I will admit that I'm also incredibly spoiled because I started working in school choice full time at the very beginning of the greatest run at the 3P. But in my perspective, it's even from a policy perspective, is these lawmakers need to know that if they don't support school choice, they don't support their families, they're going to lose their seat. I'd like to have a more hopeful view of politicians, but I think appealing to that base aspirations to get reelected or to move on to higher office, that's what I've seen work in most of these states across the country. You talk about rural Republicans, is for years you could be a Republican and vote against school choice, which is a party platform issue, and you could vote against it because there was no consequence for that. That world doesn't exist anymore, and I think a lot of work needs to go into reminding people of that.
Okay, that was political. Can we be a little more policy?
I can't help it.
Or maybe Chris, we're counting on you for that.
Wait, no.
You go. I know you're going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, well, from AFP's perspective, we do our due diligence in ensuring that the candidates that we endorse, that they go through a litany of questions, surveys, to ensure that they are the right candidate that's going to champion this particular issue of school choice. But also, we have an army. We have an army of activists and concerned folks that really are fed up with the conditions of our public school system here in Virginia. Not just public schools, but just the schooling system overall. And they want to have a voice. And so what we do is we empower them to have that voice, to go talk to their legislature, to call them, to write them, to email them, to see them in a coffee shop, and to talk to them about their concerns and their issues and why it's just critical that they support educational freedom. Along with the activists, I just mentioned a few weeks back, we took a really a community approach to really go into each community, not really to bring in the policy wonks, not to bring in the political, but the everyday families, to say, what are your thoughts on education? What are you hearing in your community? And I can tell you all the way from Virginia Beach to up here in Alexandria, it was a consistent, we are fed up. And it's a range of parents and students from a range of different communities. We all know Virginia is very diverse in terms of communities, depending on where you are in our Commonwealth. And what we heard was parents upset and fed up and saying, I don't care about party. I'm not concerned about if you're Republican or Democrat. We're concerned about choice and freedom, and so we want our voice to be heard. So what we're doing at AFP is capturing that anger, giving them a voice to say, hey, a way to really get your voice heard is to talk to your legislator about supporting this particular issue. Come, Ginny. Hope that was real.
Yes.
Okay, non-political. When we talk about ESAs especially, people always talk about examples of what parents can do with the dollars, like what kind of providers they can be going to. So I think what a normal person who's engaged in this, who wants to advance education freedom in Virginia can do is highlight the innovators and the weirdos in the education space. The people who are doing things that that's not what I thought education or classrooms should look like. The thing about school choice is we think so small. We think about classrooms and buildings. Moving a kid from a classroom that was in a public school to a classroom that was really similar in a private school or in a charter school. But what people don't realize is how small they're thinking about education freedom and how limited of a lens they're looking at a successful education system through. So if you highlight these innovators, people who are doing micro-schooling or unschooling, there's all sorts of examples out there. You've got to find them and highlight them in your community to say, why can't our education system look more like this? People can envision what a more robust school choice system looks like better when they see a landscape of different providers. They don't just say, well, there's no private school near me. What school choice can you do for me?
All right. All great answers, political and policy. Okay, so we're going to move to audience questions in just a minute, but I want to have one final lightning round. We always want to be dispelling school choice myths. I think that's something that we really need to be doing as we're preparing for legislative sessions, just as we're being, the policy wonks that we are. I'd like for each of you to say the school choice myth that you would like to tackle, and then people can come to you afterwards and you can chat about it over a glass of wine. So you don't have to respond to it now, but just know that these guys, they've got the answers. Let's see, so I would like to tackle the myth that school choice does not serve children with special needs.
This is the hardest question you would ask. I love talking about school choice plans. School choice takes money from public schools.
All right, he's your guy.
I think it's the best line.
I would say that school choice picks winners and losers, and really it picks the student that's most in need, that can most benefit from this amazing opportunity and choice for the parent and for the child.
Well, I was going to do outline school choice takes money from public schools, but I'll put it a different way. Rather than funding school choice, we should be pumping more money into public schools. So the angle of like, what about the public schools? What are the trends in public schools without raising funds? So that's
Right. Okay, so everybody, please do follow up. We would love to tackle these myths, and there's so many more. I actually have a transcript of a session that I recorded with Corey DeAngelis on tackling school choice myths. Happy to share that with you. Happy to email any of those videos or conversations that we have regularly at IWF. Okay, super excited for audience questions because we're in a room of super sharp people. I'm gonna, Emma, should we pass the mic or just audience members should ask loudly? Gabriella? Okay, you know what? Audience members shout loudly. So Stephen, yes.
Thank you for doing this, and I work with Ginny on Ed Reform DA, but my biggest thing I would say is a comment for Virginia. I'm passionate because I'm a Virginian. We went too small, and Governor Youngkin has, I love Governor Youngkin, but he also went too small. These other places, they went big and they won because the normal school choice narrative does not include people like myself or middle class people who needed school choice, whose parents had to sacrifice. And so my big comment would be two things to take back to Virginia. One is we need universal school choice with 85% funding, period. And two, we need to make sure that charter schools are not approved by the local school boards, but by the state. Because Fairfax County would never approve their opponents. And it's so blue here that even if you wanted, you couldn't get it. So.
Right, and Virginia's weird about that. Like most states, either you can appeal to the state, or there is a state authorizer, or a higher education entity authorizing this. So Virginia's behind the times when it comes to charter authorizing. Did you have a question too?
Yeah. I was wondering if one you could speak to some of the benefits to teachers that school choice provides, especially liberal arts colleges are closing left and right. There's a lot of educators looking for new opportunities.
I feel like this
you can
is
go.
a Christian question. Well, I'll point out just two things that are related. First of all, of the states that did universal school choice this year, 5 of them passed teacher raises at the same time for teachers in the public school system, which that's not a coincidence. If you go into the education packages that have been passed by the majority of these states that did universal school choice, there has been a dedicated effort to also further resource and improve things for teachers and for public schools. So that's just one thing. But I also think, and maybe you guys will want to add to this, is the competitive nature of this idea of school choice is we're creating a competitive marketplace for education providers where you want to compete for value and passing value on the students. There have been 6 studies done that show that kind of competitive ecosystem actually leads to increases in teacher salaries as schools compete for the best teachers. I also think that there are a lot of teachers out there that are disenfranchised by this system that they're stuck in, and I'm reading lots of really encouraging stories about teachers who are using school choice programs to start their own micro school, or to operate a learning pod, or in some cases even start their own brick and mortar school. I expect all of those things to continue, and I think they're very encouraging.
So as a child, I don't want to sound too young here, we are at a Young Voices event, but my parents are both active teachers in Virginia public schools. So the thing about teachers is that you hear this all the time, they've had flat salaries for decades. And that's true. That doesn't mean teacher compensation hasn't gone up. It means that the prevailing public school system, more and more of the money that goes into public schools goes to teacher benefits. So that's obviously the rising cost of healthcare, but pension systems. So the main thing that teachers are struggling with now, they really do have flat salaries. So if you have a more robust education landscape, you're getting teachers out of this one option where a lot of their compensation has to be deferred compensation in retirement. And it's a structure of deferred compensation that's really not used in the private sector almost anywhere. So that's part of the teachers are not being served very well by public schools now. I was going to say one more thing, but I'm forgetting right now. Oh, the other thing is that most teachers are on salary step ladders. So you're compensated based on how many years of experience you have and what level of education you have. So the teacher, they can look at their salary schedule, know that there might be some raises that future governors will do. They're like, well, it's going to take 15 years for me to be making $70,000 a year. That does not make any sense. So that's another thing. If you have a robust education landscape, you can have teacher compensation being done in such a way that rewards teachers that a school or a parent values for whatever reason, not just teacher performance or ability to improve test scores.
Awesome. Other questions?
Yep.
We'll go to the second.
Oh, okay. A lot of questions, but let's just put this one out there. So, underserved, underrepresented students, you know, that's something that Fairfield County Public School Board uses all the time as a way to just stay stuck in the paradigm that we're stuck in the last 150 years. What is the way to speak to, and you know, the fact that we are not going to leave, you know, the underrepresented as well as the lower income, you know, families who don't really have that aperture. And how do we speak to that to make sure that they're going to have confidence that whatever we're doing is going to benefit them as well?
Well, one of the things that we found from our listening session and talking to a lot of teachers in Richmond City and a lot of underserved schools, we found, this was really surprising, that a lot of them were saying, we want to start a micro school. Now, we'll get with some of our partners at AFP to really walk them through resources on how this can be a reality for them, what steps they need to take. They didn't know. They just say, oh, I heard about this idea of I can actually go out and start my own school because I've been, you know, in an environment that has not served the personal growth of the teacher or the students, and they just kind of want to get out. And they're looking at this micro school option. And they're saying, not me or anyone from our team, but they're saying that they feel that that option will help with the kids that feel they're left behind because of there's some ESA that doesn't serve that particular kid, or the tax credit doesn't meet the threshold for that particular parent. They're looking at the micro school option as something that could be very useful and beneficial to them. We've had several community leaders and pastors say that they want to start this concept like church community centers. So we find, I think, just hearing from them, that that's something that's starting to really build up and starting to really catch on its own movement. We're going to look into that more at AFP and the micro schools, and really getting in touch with these teachers that want out and they want to start their own journey with the micro schools. So I think that's just one option.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. I mean, I think the root of your question is like, how are these programs going to serve, you know, the most disenfranchised students? Two approaches you can take is, first, there's a lot of data that shows how usually the most disadvantaged students are benefiting the most from these programs. But a lot of times people don't want to listen to data. And that's where I think you have the make unique use of the personal story. And this is something that the school choice movement hasn't had until recently. I actually personally benefited from the school choice scholarship in Florida, the tax credit scholarship. And that's been a major part of my life. I never would have gone to college if it wasn't for that scholarship. And that is a very useful thing in counteracting some of these things. I'll give you an example from 2 weeks ago. I had a meeting with the editorial board of the San Antonio Express News, which God knows why I agreed to that. But I was sitting there, and one of the editors stopped me, and she says, "You're just wrong. This will not help low-income kids. It won't do it." And I just kind of collected myself and looked at her, and she said, "Well, that was me. If that argument had won the day 20 years ago, I wouldn't be here. I never would have gotten my education, never would have gone to college." And she was just kind of like, here's this, extremely intelligent, highly educated lady. She just didn't know what to say to that. So, in those sort of, impasses, I would like to make, the American Federation for Children, we have a fellowship program that is filled with more than 30 school choice beneficiaries like myself, who not only benefited from school choice personally, but get communications training so that they learn how to tell their stories and to talk about this. In the right environment, please reach out. We'd love to plug fellows in. I would love, love, love to find some from Virginia. maybe that's something that you all can help us out with. That'd be great.
Great. All right, the question back here.
So in this immediate area, the sort of wealthier counties around DC, there are a lot of schools now that are involved in sort of culture war issues. Do you all ever talk about ways school choice can address that? And do you think that helps with any in promoting school choice?
Sure, yeah.
I'll address that.
Yeah, everybody. It's so funny. I work at Christian. I'm just going to add that as a disclaimer. It's very obvious that the culture war issues have been a huge boon for school choice expansion. I mean, however you feel about, I'm not going to name any names, this is what has animated school choice and put it as a top 3 issue for conservatives. I mean, the organizations and the entities that were responsible for advancing school choice research for 20 years just got outdid by conservatives just over the course of 3 years. So I think I just want to acknowledge the reality that, however you feel about how important some of these culture war issue items are to you, it's been a huge catalyst for advancing school choice. Of course, my perspective on this is that school choice is a way that you can avoid these clashes of values that are unsolvable. If you allow families to be able to go into an environment that fits their values or whatever it is that they want in a school environment, then you won't have these parents who are screaming at school board meetings because they have an exit option or they have alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, AFP, we don't necessarily dive into the social, cultural, or issues. We're really focused on the fabric of freedom and how that can be spread in the community. And we believe that if you give that parent and they're empowered to remove their child from a school that they feel is not fitting their learning needs, and they need to be put in an environment that does fit that, they have the options, they have the choices. So with that argument, we feel that if the parent has a choice, they're going to remove their child from that particular school that is not suited for the current learning needs that child needs to be able to reach their full potential.
Yeah, so the Independent Women's Forum is a C3, and I run the Education Freedom Center there. And the point of the Education Freedom Center is to acknowledge the problems in the K-12 education world, which includes these cultural issues and these ideologies, and point to the solution, which is education freedom. Education freedom provides a solution in that it gives the options. The parents can go out and find a fit that matches their values, but it also gives the parents who want to stay and fight in the public school system leverage. It gives them a voice. They can say, look, because there's a universal program in my state, I can leave. I will leave if you don't listen to me. Right now, these Northern Virginia parents have absolutely no voice and they have no leverage. So we believe school choice gives options, it gives voice, and it gives leverage, and it's really important. I think we've got time for one more question, so let's go to that.
So my question is, in a day and age where I think people are rethinking kind of the necessity of pursuing higher education, how do you advocate for school choice, and how do people be more prepared to kind of do a variety of things after their K through 12 years that's not necessarily higher education? Because I think kind of one of the key arguments for school choice is that people are going to have a better chance of getting into college, being successful in college, and will be better prepared. But I think in this day and age, a lot of people are choosing not to go to college. So how would they still be prepared better through a school choice?
Well, I think a strong K through 12 education gives you choices afterwards, right? There's still people who do want to go to college and pursue 4-year degrees, and I think that's great. But there are a lot of different options that are being created in this sort of ecosystem that Christian was talking about earlier. One of our fellows attended a trade charter school in Idaho, where I don't remember what trade she does, but she knows how to fix stuff more than me. And there's all sort of, I personally toured a farm micro school in Florida where they spend 2 hours every day learning about agriculture and doing stuff like that. All of these different things, I think what you're getting at is a more expansive view of what education could be and what opportunities that could create for students further down the line. I think school choice is an obvious plus for all of those things.
Yeah, I think also the unique opportunity with school choice is that the be based on a really innovative approach that if a student is interested in coding, they can learn coding and come right out of that school at the 12th grade and go into a great job without going to college. As we know, tech jobs pay a lot of money and they're hiring a lot of young talent. And I've just seen I've talked to a lot of students that have taken part in some of these coding sort of courses in curriculum, and they came out and they got some really fantastic jobs and really have been able to they say, achieve and go after the American dream. So I think it just really provides students, especially, when to go back on that last question on an underserved student, it allows them an opportunity to really get out of their environment and to really just reach for the stars and achieve their dreams. And personally, I was able to do that in Detroit. And again, if I did not have those opportunities, I probably would have never left Detroit. And there's several students and kids that I talked to throughout Virginia, and from Norfolk to Richmond City, that you're just looking for that opportunity. And when they have it, they seize it. I mean, the sky is going to be the limit for them. So I think that's probably one of the best options for them is how innovative it can be with the school choice option.
I think this is another area where we have like a really limited imagination because we're so used to the prevailing public school system, which is K through 12, high school is a lot of college.
Right.
This is another area to highlight what innovators and weirdos are doing different, which is, doing certifications. You're talking about trades. The only way to address that is to have a robust landscape of providers. So something I'm starting to be more interested in, and again, this is where everyone in the room can help, is thinking about, okay, who's going to be the person who gets paid by an ESA student? Who's going to be the person who serves in this market in the education landscape? And I think that can allow families to start specializing and gaining concrete skills before they're 18 years old.
Great. Well, thank you to our panelists. I just want to finish the answer that I was giving before, switching. There's Independent Women's Forum, we have the Education Freedom Center, and then we also have a grassroots organization, Independent Women's Network. Our founder, Julie Gunlock, is here. She's also WMAL co-host in the morning, so you're the best celebrity. And if you all are interested, if you all do live in Northern Virginia or DC, actually, that there are Independent Women's Network chapters, and we have a lot of resources on the topics that we're talking about today, and a lot of the other policy issues. But thank you so much again to Young Voices for this opportunity, and thank you so much to our panelists. Really appreciate it.